Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Cannons and Cocktails. This is actually the fourth installment of Cannons and Cocktails. We started over a year ago on this series, which is really exciting. And that is all possible because of Susan Johnson and the team here at Denny's Point Distillery. Alana behind the bar, making amazing drinks for you all night. Please be sure and take very good care of her. And from the very beginning, it's been important to Susan and the team here that this be a fundraiser. So this evening, all four of these evenings are fundraisers for the Beacon Historical Society. So we really encourage you, the red box at the back of the door when you leave, if you can just throw some cash in there to help support the Beacon Historical Society, that would be great. So, we're going to get started. It is my pleasure, as it always has been for the last 3 episodes, and certainly tonight, to introduce this gentleman. First off, I'm Scott Ramsey, and I'm the host of this event, and I'm the executive producer of Fort Beacon Studios. And this gentleman has been an active duty officer of the Army since 1995. He is an enlisted paratrooper, he's an armor officer, a military advisor, and he is a history professor at the Military Academy at West Point. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Colonel Sean Sculley.
Hi everybody, thank you for coming.
And so we're doing this because obviously we're in the middle of celebrating the Revolutionary War, right? It's the 250th anniversary this summer on July 4th. And this is a war that actually went over the course of many years, and it started 250 years ago last year. So that's why we started this series, because we really wanted to have a moment to think about how special historically those moments were as part of the war, and also how much of it happened right in this area. That's been a big part of this conversation. Before we get started, I always like to get people to understand sort of your grounding in history. And you shared with us many times that when you were young, you lived abroad and had many sort of interesting international experiences. And especially, I remember you talking about in the UK, there were some monasteries and castles you were traveling around, and that sort of lit you up historically about what was happening there, what were the stories that happened there, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And so do you remember a particular moment or a favorite castle or monastery or historical building that really you could say was when the switch flipped?
Yeah. It was Hever Castle. Does anybody here know Hever Castle? It was Henry VIII's gift to Anne Boleyn before he killed her. Anybody? I lived very near to Hever Castle. And so when I was 10 years old, my parents took me and my sister to Hever Castle, and they, like a lot of the Tudor manors and castles of the 15th and 16th centuries, they had a maze. And so you're 10 years old, they have a hedge maze, you're gonna fall in love with that, right? That's gonna be fantastic, especially when you try to get your younger sister lost and come out by yourself. And I fell in love with Hever Castle, and so I began to learn the history of Hever Castle, the history of Henry VIII, the history of Anne Boleyn, and I actually began to give tours. I think I was 11 or 12 years old, and I started being the person in our family who would take people who were visiting us in the UK to Hever Castle, and I would give them the tour of Hever Castle.
Nice, excellent. And the Sculleys are actually with us this evening, so thank you for bringing.
So anything I tell you that's a lie,
yeah,
they'll be able to correct me later.
You can back it up.
Yeah, they'll be able
That's
to
great, excellent. And so then flash forward, you are now a history professor and have been for many, many years, since 1995.
No, not a history professor.
Right.
So I was enlisted in the Army from 95 until the end of 99, and then I became an officer. I didn't actually, so I flunked out of college. So when I was in my teens and late or early 20s, I didn't go to class, and that makes it really hard to pass. So I enlisted in the Army, and then when I became an officer, the Army required that I get a bachelor's degree. Nice. And so the quickest degree I could get was in history. That's why I picked it, but also because I loved it.
Nice.
And I studied European history. So I never planned on being an American historian.
Okay.
West Point decided when they asked me if I wanted to apply to go to graduate school and teach at the academy, they told me if you do, you're going to be an American historian.
Nice.
and I picked colonial America because that's British history in America. That made sense to me, and that led me to the Revolution. So it was a very long, just like the rest of my life, most of my life.
Yeah.
I start way over here, and I end up way over
Lots of twists and turns. But we are fortunate and very grateful that you are, in fact, a Revolutionary War expert. So let's start talking about that.
Okay.
So the last three episodes we've done, the last time we left it, we talked about the invasion marches north, up into Canada. We've got Washington in the Boston area, right? Is that what's happening?
That's right. He has remained in Cambridge, just outside of Boston. He is in command of the main army that has surrounded Boston and is not allowing the British army to leave the city.
Okay. And tell me, what time is this?
This would be starting in June after Bunker Hill. Washington takes command in July, and all through that summer, that fall, the winter, all of that time when that Northern Army was invading into Canada, Washington is training his army, drilling his army, building fortifications, and trying to force the British to leave Boston and to leave North America.
And what kind of numbers are we talking as far as like how many British are in Boston, in that area, versus Washington?
At that point in time, the British, because they had brought reinforcements, had about 9,000 to 10,000 soldiers. The Americans had about 20,000 soldiers.
Oh, wow.
But that number was never static because all of those soldiers were enlisted loosely until the end of December of 1775.
Okay.
And most of them didn't really see themselves as being in a regular army in the way we would today. So when they felt like they needed to go home, they went home. And then when they were ready to come back, they came back. Most of them were farm boys.
Yeah.
They were needed at home in the fall for the harvest. So they would leave and they would go bring in the crop and then they would come back. This drove Washington insane.
Yeah.
But the numbers fluctuated.
Okay.
For the Americans.
And you were sharing a story with me about how there were some cannons that Washington wanted to get a hold of, right?
Well, this is key to getting the British to leave.
Not cocktails, just cannons.
Just cannons. they had cocktails.
The cocktails, yeah, exactly.
Madeira wine and rum and
Nice.
whiskey.
Probably some cider
Always,
too, I'm sure.
always, lots of cider. Sorry, Scott. Yes, of course, cider. That was what they had for breakfast, so I didn't really think about it. So Washington needs artillery to make the British position in Boston untenable. He cannot assault the city with just infantry. If he does, he will lose too many soldiers. He needs cannon. He knows where the cannon are located. The problem is that the cannon are located in upstate New York, and there are mountains between him and them. But in November, in fact on November 15th of 1775, he decides he's got to dispatch an officer to go to Fort Ticonderoga, go look at all these cannon that are located there, pick the best ones, and drag them back to Boston.
How did he know that they were there?
Everybody knew they were there.
Oh, okay.
Fort Ticonderoga was a key fort during the French and Indian War. It was built by the French. It was placed on a peninsula that juts out into Lake Champlain. It guarded a portage site between that lake and Lake George, guarding the ability for any army to move on the waters from Quebec to New York City. That point had been fought over for 2 decades before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So everybody knew that those cannon were there. They knew what was at Fort Ticonderoga, and they also, I think we talked about this a little bit. The Americans had already seized the fort. Ethan Allen had seized the fort. Benedict Arnold had raced up there and acted like he was a colonel, but he didn't have any soldiers, right? There was a captain from Connecticut that had brought a company up there. So the Americans have control of the fort, and they've been inventorying the cannon. But there's nobody up there who really knows artillery in the way that Henry Knox does, which is the officer that Washington is going to send.
Excellent. So I think my mic has gone out, but I'm happy to just project. So tell us a little bit more about Henry Knox.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Henry Knox is a very colorful figure, both physically and in terms of his actions. He's very tall. He's very large. In 1775, he's 25 years old. He's a bookseller. He owns a bookstore in Boston. When he was a young boy, his father abandoned his family. He had to apprentice at a very young age, so he apprenticed to a bookbinder. That then led him into the book business. He opened up a bookstore that he owned himself right after he witnessed personally the Boston Massacre on March 5th of 1770. It was in his bookstore that he met the love of his life, Lucy, who was also a very tall person, so they went well together. And he read all the time. And he was very interested in reading about military matters. He was very interested in reading about artillery. Despite the fact that he had lost 2 fingers in an accident a few years earlier when his hunting gun exploded on him, he had the knowledge to fire artillery. He had been taught to do so with ceremonial cannon in the town of Boston. And that is the most experience anybody had in Washington's army to fire artillery. So Henry Knox is about to become the chief of artillery for the entire American army because he read books.
How does he know Washington?
So he knows Washington. He meets Washington when Washington comes to Boston in July. He has read books on engineering. Mm-hmm. He designs the defenses at Roxbury, which is one of the locations surrounding Boston. He impresses Washington with his plan. Mm-hmm. Washington starts to pay attention to him. Okay. Washington is very interested in determining who should be his key officers based on the merit that he sees from the work that they're doing outside of Boston. He's paying attention all the time, and Knox is one of those guys who catches his eye.
Nice.
And so on November 15th, he tells Knox, go to Fort Ticonderoga, find the best cannon you can, and bring them back to Boston. And Henry Knox doesn't say, how do you want me to do that? He doesn't say, that's not possible. He goes, okay. And he's in Ticonderoga within 2 weeks.
Wow. And what's the whole process of him, getting all those cannons back to Boston?
Okay, well, first he had to inventory the cannon. He had to make sure that he got the best ones. He's not bringing all of them. There are 135 cannon there. All of them are heavy. If any of you have ever lifted a cannon, I'm going to call you a liar. So they're all very heavy. He inventories the best 58 cannon. It's a total of 60 tons of iron. He then has to get them off of the fort. And if you've not been to Fort Ticonderoga, please take some time soon and go. It's a wonderful place. They've done a fantastic job of building it back up, renovating it.
Yeah.
But you will see why it would be so difficult to lower heavy metal down to the shoreline. He does that. Then he gets them onto sleds, and he has to move them across to Lake George. So he actually has to go through the town that is today Ticonderoga to get to the north end of Lake George. Then he puts them on rafts.
Oh, wow.
He floats them down Lake George, gets them back on sleds. He builds 42 sleds for 58 cannon, half a mile long, all pulled together with rope, and then he waits for it to snow.
Wow.
He needs it to snow. He needs it to snow, and he needs the water to freeze because of, friction. It'll make it easier for the animals to pull the sleds because they're so heavy. So he waits for it to snow. It does, and then he begins pulling this long train of cannon all the way to Albany. But to get to Albany, he's on the east side of the Hudson River. He has to first cross the Mohawk River, then he has to cross the Hudson River, and then he has to cross the Berkshire Mountains.
Oh my God.
So this is an incredible task. And he's doing it under a time constraint. So the colder it gets, the snowier it gets, the better it is, because the ice is going to get thicker, it's going to get stronger. But still, when he crosses the Mohawk River, the ice breaks. And he loses one cannon. Luckily, he doesn't lose any horses. I do want to tell you ahead of time, no horses die in the telling of the story. So now they're a little worried about the Hudson. They've got to cross the Hudson River. So he sends his pioneers out onto the ice where they drill holes into the ice. They take snow packs, they pack the holes with snow, then they let it get wet, and when it freezes, it actually makes the ice stronger. It structurally makes the ice stronger. And then he crosses the Hudson River. But at the same time, he has men walking right next to the horses with axes and knives, not to kill the horses, but if a cannon breaks through the ice and drags the horse back towards the water, they can cut the traces to save the horse.
Wow.
Because they're not going to be able to save the cannon. But that doesn't happen. They get across the river, and now they start heading into the Berkshire Mountains. Another spoiler alert, Mass Pike doesn't exist in 1775, 1776, but the trail is practically the same. We will be doing some research actually with cadets soon to figure out how exact that is, but it's fairly close. So now they've got to get through the Berkshire Mountains. The only way they're going to be able to manage this, they are going to have poles, pulleys, chains, traces. They're going to have to drag the cannon up the mountains by looping chain around tree trunks and using pulleys to pull them up the cliffs. Then, as they get on the other side, they're going to have to put horses on the back of the sleds, and the horses will brace the sleds as they go down the hill. And guess what happens when they get down that hill? They got to go up another hill. And they are going to do this over and over for 40 days.
Wow.
For 40 days. And at the end of that time, he gets 57 of 58 cannon to Framingham, Massachusetts, in time for Washington to use them before the spring arrives.
Yeah, that was going to be my question is, like, does he actually use the cannons, like, in that
Oh,
area?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So there may be some people here who are fans of Mark Wahlberg or the Wahlbergs. If so, you'll know where they're from. They're from Dorchester Heights in Boston. Well, that didn't used to be in Boston. That used to be a ridge line that overlooked Boston. Washington wants to place the cannons on Dorchester Heights. There is another officer who actually has engineering experience because he fought in the French and Indian War, and he worked with the British as an engineer, and his name is Rufus Putnam. He's related to Israel Putnam. Rufus Putnam doesn't want to be an engineer. He wants to be an infantry officer, but Washington's going to make him the chief of his engineers. He designs a plan that has 28 separate positions on Dorchester Heights with the distances exactly calculated from each position to the city so that he knows how far the cannon have to range.
Wow.
He will then have soldiers from February 11th until March 4th build forts not on the ridgeline because the British could see them. The British could have fired on them, but back from the ridgeline. And then on the night of the 4th, they are going to pick all of that stuff up. They're going to move it into position on the ridgeline along with the cannon and surprise the British on the 5th of March at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
It is going to look as if somebody snapped their fingers and all of a sudden there are 28 forts, all with cannon, all staring down into Boston. And that's exactly how it happens. And Washington is so inspired, he is riding up and down the line of Dorchester Heights because he is reminding every single one of those soldiers, it's the 5th of March. It is the 6th anniversary of the Boston Massacre. And you know that almost every soldier on that ridgeline knows that as well. They're all from Massachusetts, from New England. They're all very aware of this. And it is that plan and that execution that forces the British to leave within 15 days. By March 20th, the British are out of Boston.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. And so from that happens, the British leave Boston. And then what happens next? That's when we start to move down into the New York City area, right?
That's right.
Okay.
So a couple of things are going to happen.
Yeah.
Washington is going to prepare to move his army to New York City. Everybody assumes that the British are going to move to New York City next. Now what has happened is Richard Howe and William Howe are brothers. William Howe is the commander of the British Army. Richard Howe is the commander of the British Navy. They are working together on this. So Richard Howe moves all of his brother's soldiers to Nova Scotia, to Halifax. Washington knows that very soon that same fleet is going to sail south, and they're going to attack New York City because they need a harbor that doesn't freeze in the winter. Congress also knows that that's going to happen. They've been planning for it. So starting in January of 1776, because Washington is busy at Boston, Congress puts Major General Charles Lee in charge of building the defenses of New York City. Lee's an interesting guy. We will talk about him more next time.
Okay.
As long as there is a next time. If everybody would like that.
We got big plans.
We got big plans.
Big plans.
Big plans.
Yeah.
But Lee is a former British officer. He fought in the French and Indian War, and then he comes to Virginia, and he stays in Virginia, and he becomes a patriot. But he describes himself as a shy bitch. His words. He wrote that
Quote,
down.
unquote.
That's who he is. He doesn't like people. He only likes his dogs. I don't even know if he likes other dogs. He likes his dogs. He has a lot of them. This is an interesting profession for a person who doesn't like people to be in, to be the leader of soldiers. He also doesn't have a lot of confidence in the American army. I don't blame him at this point. He doesn't believe that he can defend New York. I also don't blame him for that. The Americans don't have a navy. I'm assuming that a few of you have been to New York City before. So you know that it's surrounded by water. Without a navy, it's going to be very difficult to defend.
But let's describe New York City at this point. So this
Right.
is 1776.
Yes.
New York City is...
New York City is a lot smaller than it is today.
Right, right.
New York City does not extend much past Warren Street. So if any of you know where Warren Street is in downtown, that would be maybe 4 blocks north of St. Paul's Chapel. So it does not extend further than that. If you've ever been to City Hall Park, that was a common ground area for grazing cattle. And the city's population is 25,000.
Yeah, and I think that's so interesting. Like if you think about that, that's not even double of Beacon currently. So
Right.
just to give you a sense of like the size and scope of the population that we're
Right.
talking about. Yeah.
That's right. So it's 10,000 people more than currently live in Beacon today.
Right.
So it's not very large, but it is one of the 4 biggest ports in North America. Most of the commerce in the colonial era passes between Great Britain, the Caribbean, and North America through 4 ports: Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Charleston. So New York is considered a bustling commercial town. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so George Washington comes in with his troops.
So Washington is going to move in and take over command from Charles Lee,
Okay.
because he is the commander-in-chief, and that is where the main battles are going to be fought in 1776, and he knows that. And he's going to move 12,000 soldiers to just outside of New York City. Now, those 12,000 soldiers, that's half of the population of New York City at the time. Now, there are plenty of people who are beginning to flee New York City because they know that a battle is coming, and if you're a civilian, you probably don't want to be in the way. But they are not going to house them in the town. They're not going to put them in people's homes, because that was one of the complaints of the Americans against the British prior to the Revolution. Instead, they're going to place them in an encampment that today would be where Bowery Lane and Canal Street connect. So again, in downtown, what is downtown today? But they're going to encamp in that area there, and then Washington is going to put them to work.
Wow.
He has to build forts everywhere because he doesn't have a navy. He doesn't know where the British are going to land. He doesn't know where they're going to attack. So he's going to start building fortifications on Brooklyn Heights. He's going to build Fort Washington a little later on where Washington Bridge is currently located. He is going to place forts on Bedloe Island, which is where the Statue of Liberty is today. He will put fortifications at is it Battery Park right there on the so there will be a battery placed there or a fort placed there. So he's going to build forts all around. He's going to put gun emplacements along the East River. He's going to put gun emplacements along the Hudson River.
Wow.
So quite a bit of work.
I think one of the things that's really interesting to me when we were talking earlier is about the fact that there was a very strong presence of loyalists during this time period who felt very strongly loyal to the British. And so talk a little bit about that, like the fact that there was that dichotomy even at that time.
Absolutely. So New York City actually is a hotbed for loyalism in 1775 and 1776. John Adams famously claimed, he didn't really know. He's doing, Adams is talking, he's expressing a feeling that during the Revolution, 1/3 of Americans were patriot, 1/3 of Americans were loyalists, and 1/3 of Americans were undecided. Now, there's no way to know that because Gallup didn't put their poll out that year, so we're not sure. 1,800 people were not called that year to find out how they felt about the Revolution. But it does speak to the fact that there was a sizable population of people who were more conservative in their politics. They did not see splitting from Great Britain as a viable choice. They might not have liked everything that the British Empire was trying to do to consolidate power after the French and Indian War, but they understood the reasoning behind it, and they believed, as British citizens, well, British subjects, that their king was their liege. Mm-hmm. They owed their loyalty to Parliament. Mm-hmm. Many of those people lived in New York City, and in part because their livelihood was so connected to the empire. All of their trade was with London or with other British merchants and plantation owners in the Caribbean. So to say that you want to go to war with the rest of your family with whom you are conducting commerce and you have real family that live in London or in the Caribbean or wherever, mm-hmm. just seemed insane to them.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting idea to think about the fact, as we reflect back on this historical moment, and it was obviously it's such a big part of our story as patriots to this country, that at that time there were folks who were not, in support of that. And I think that's just intriguing to think about how we review history and think, oh, well, that was absolutely the right choice. But we were talking, and I was wondering if you were to ask those people today with the kind of reflective ability we have, would they still have loyalty to the British Empire? Right. I don't know.
Well, and my response was, they might just look at Canada and say, if we had just waited another 150 years, we could have done all this without any bloodshed.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would be, it's a counterfactual. It's possible that the American Revolution causes the British Empire to change in 1783. In fact, we know that it does. And that change is then going to change focus from settler colonization to other forms of colonization. They're going to begin focusing on India and Africa. They are going to have greater administrative control over their empire, mm-hmm. and that's then going to lead to other events. And then after World War II, you're going to get this change in the British Empire that's going to lead to the Commonwealth. Would all of that happen if there was an American Revolution? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. All right. So we've got this sort of friction between loyalists and the folks who are fighting the British. What sort of shifts that? There's a moment, right, that starts to, the popular perspective starts to shift.
So in January of 1776, a 46-page pamphlet is published in Philadelphia, and it's called Common Sense. Have we heard of Common Sense before? All right, so Thomas Paine, who is an English writer, he becomes a writer he writes first in Great Britain, so that'll work. He's an English writer. He's born in England. His father makes stays for sailing vessels, just stout rope to keep masts up. He goes into that business as well, but then his business fails. He also loses his wife and his only child.
Oh, wow.
And he begins to work for the excise office. So he's a customs officer. But he doesn't like how little he gets paid. He doesn't like how little his fellow excise officers get paid. And he writes a political piece to try to convince Parliament to pay the excise officers more. And it gets him fired. So in 1773, he runs into Benjamin Franklin in London. Franklin is in London trying to convince Parliament that their laws that they are passing are bad laws for North America. He's the agent, if you will, for the Americans in Parliament. He runs into Thomas Paine while Paine is trying to convince Parliament to pay him more. He likes what Paine wrote. And he tells him, go to Philadelphia. I have a friend there by the name of Robert Aiken who's trying to begin an American magazine. Go there, tell him I sent you, I'll write you a letter, and go write for him. Paine takes him up on his offer. He gets on a ship, he goes to Philadelphia. Unfortunately, while he's on the water in the Atlantic, the water goes bad in the ship, everybody gets typhoid, he almost dies.
Oh, wow.
Several people do die, he doesn't, but they had to carry him bodily off of the ship and nurse him back to health. But when he gets better, Robert Aiken hires him. Paine writes an article, an abolitionist article, against slavery. It gets published in the Pennsylvania Magazine, which is the only American magazine. There had been 16 others previous, but they had all gone under. None of them were made for American writers. They were all made for British, reconsumption of British writing. Aiken wants an American magazine written by someone in America for American colonists. So he publishes Paine's abolitionist piece. It's well received in Pennsylvania. Aiken likes it so much he makes him the editor of the magazine.
Wow.
Paine gets the magazine going in 1775. It gets very popular all across the colonies. And in January of 1776, he writes a 46-page pamphlet on why it's nonsense that one man should rule everybody simply because he was born to the right family. And he names the piece Common Sense because he wants to both appeal to a sense of right and wrong that is common to all of us, but then convince all of his readers that not allowing a king to rule, but instead to be represented in government in a republic makes good sense that all of us would agree to or hold in common. So the book is named Common Sense for two reasons.
Yeah. So like the common sense, you do a better job of describing this than I do, but the common sense of the individual
and then the sense
collective.
we all have in common.
Yeah.
Right?
Just so clever.
And that is actually what he's appealing to. So he's the first person to make an argument for republicanism and representative government in America that is meant to be read and understood by everybody instead of people who went to Harvard. Honestly, the Enlightenment writers of the day, the philosophers, if you read their work, it is amazing, but you better know your Latin, you better know your Greek and Roman analogies and your history, and you better know your big words. Pull out the thesaurus, figure it out, because you're not going to understand what they're saying. Paine understood what they were saying, and then he used the Bible, and he used regular language. He broke everything down so that I could understand it, and I have read it, and I can understand it, which is great. I have to say, sometimes with Locke. No, I can't say that all the time. And then he published and sold 100,000 copies in 3 months to a population of 2 million.
Yeah. So I was thinking, we were talking about this earlier too, and I am fascinated by this idea of, communication has always interested me in the way that, cultures behave. And you think about, again, we're talking 1776. There are no cell phones, there's no mass communication. And yet there's still like 100,000 copies of this book being sold. That just boggles my mind.
Right.
And like how they're getting out into the world, I just am so fascinated by that.
Well, and then what would happen, copyright laws weren't what they are today. And it was really hard to impose or to enforce any of those. So what is happening as well, publishers are getting a hold of a copy, they are setting the type, and then they are printing their own copies, and they're selling their own copies. Thomas Paine sold 100,000. Historians estimate that 500,000 copies were sold throughout the Americas and in Europe.
Wow. And so this is affecting the popular sort of thinking around what's going on with the revolution and what's happening now back up in New York City at this time.
So by the time he sells 100,000 copies, it's March. The British have been pushed out of Boston. As we said, Washington's coming down to New York City. People are getting excited about the idea that this revolution may be about more than just forcing the British to stop passing bad laws. That in fact, the objective of the revolution should be, must be, will be independence. In Philadelphia, Congress is going to begin to debate that, but we'll get to that another time.
Yeah.
In New York, Washington is currently too busy trying to keep his soldiers in line. Now, there's an adage in the Army that a bored soldier is a bad soldier. You don't want Private Sculley bored. I'm getting in trouble. And I did. I will figure out a way to get in trouble. And Washington has plenty of work for them to do, but these are mostly rural kids, somewhat on a lark, in a big city, and they've never been in a big city before. They have a little money in their pocket, and so they're going to get in a little bit of trouble. And New York City offers them the ability to get in trouble. In fact, there was a famous red light district in New York in 1776 known as the Holy Grounds. It was called the Holy Grounds because it's right outside of Trinity Church, which I think is I don't know, ironic or appropriate, I'm not sure which. Soldiers are frequenting the Holy Grounds quite a bit between March and April and May of 1776, spending their money. Washington is doing everything he can to squash it, particularly on April 26th. Okay. So I don't want to fudge the date here. A few days prior to April 26th, 2 soldiers were found murdered in the Holy Grounds. Our best guess is they were murdered because they weren't paying the debts they owed to the women they were visiting. The soldiers of the army, particularly the ones who knew these 2 soldiers who had been murdered, decided that they were going to take justice into their own hands. They rioted through the Holy Grounds, burning, demolishing, plundering, and the next morning, Washington has to put a stop to all of it. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't have much ability to do so. First, who should he punish? It wasn't the entire army that did this. Can he figure out who exactly did it? Maybe, maybe not. Even if he can, he has very little authority to exact much in terms of punishment in 1776. He can imprison them for a week on water and bread. I don't think they're going to care that much about that. He cannot lash them more than 39 lashes. We've talked about that before. And if you don't understand that, that's great. We'll come up and see me afterwards and I'll explain. That will change in 1777. And so all he can do is admonish them, which is what he does. But it does calm things down a little bit. He's trying to keep them focused on the fact that the British are coming.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. And there's a whole story about a counterfeit ring that's going on, right?
That's right. So along with drinking and visiting women that you have to pay for on the off occasion, some people are getting into deeper trouble. Money in the colonial era is a bit tricky. You have some forms of money that are standard. Everybody understands what they are. The British pound, the Spanish dollar, the French livre. But then you have colonial money. And colonial money is usually paper. And paper can be counterfeited. And counterfeiting happened quite a bit in the colonial era because you could be from Connecticut and trying to spend a Connecticut dollar in Massachusetts, and maybe Massachusetts will take it, but they won't know if it's counterfeit or not, that kind of thing. Yeah. Congress has created its own money, the Continental Dollar, and it is paper money. It's scrip. They called it scrip back then. Well, that can be easily counterfeited. And so there are counterfeit rings all over Long Island and New York, and the British are funding some of them because what they want is to devalue and destabilize the continental money system. One of these rings is run by a guy named Henry Dawkins. Dawkins and his buddy Isaac Ketchum are in Huntington, Long Island. They are running a press in their attic, printing as much money as they possibly can, and they run out of paper. Well, Isaac doesn't want to stop printing the money, so he reaches out to stationers in Philadelphia to get the right quality of paper. And he does so frequently that it raises suspicion, and that causes the authorities to decide that they know what's happening in Huntington, Long Island. And so on May 12th, there's a raid at this house, Dawkins' house. Dawkins is arrested. Ketchum is arrested. Several of their compatriots are all arrested. The printing press is seized, and they are placed in the prison at New York City Hall called the Dark Hole. Apparently not a place you want to be. And they are stuck in the dark hole from May until June. And on June 9th, Isaac apparently can't take it any longer. He's done. So he says he's got information about something more important than counterfeiting. And if he tells them that information, he hopes that they will let him go because he has family and kids to feed, and he's got a sob story. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, well, tell us what you know. He says, well, I've been in this prison for a month, and people talk in this prison, and I am starting to hear rumors about all kinds of things. People are trying to assassinate George Washington. And they're like, what? Yes, I have heard down in this prison, people want to assassinate George Washington. They want to kidnap him. They want to kill all the general officers. They want to set the city on fire. So the army officers that hear this say, well, then go back in the hole and you start giving us names. And from June 9th to June 20th, Isaac starts ratting people out. Well, one of the people, he rats out a bunch of different people. He rats out a school teacher. He rats out a pensioner with only one arm. He rats out tradesmen and farmers. It's a huge conspiracy ring that they think that they've uncovered. And we don't really know how much of this is real and how much of it's not. But one man that he rats out is a guy by the name of Gilbert Forbes. And what he turns Gilbert Forbes in for is true. Forbes was running guns for the British. So Forbes is a loyalist. He has contacts with the city mayor, who is a loyalist, David Matthews. David Matthews has contacts with the governor of New York, who is a loyalist, the royal governor, Tryon. Tryon is on a ship in the harbor, because obviously he can't be in New York City at the time. He'd get arrested. David Matthews is running money from Tryon to Forbes so that Forbes can buy guns to get guns back to Tryon. And back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah.
In all of those exchanges, some of this counterfeit money gets brought into it. And Tryon is paying counterfeiters to counterfeit money. One of the people that Tryon is paying happens to be one of Washington's personal bodyguards, a guy by the name of Thomas Hickey. Now, Tom is from England originally. He came to North America with the British Army during the French and Indian War, and he deserts from the British Army. He then works in Connecticut for a while. He gets in some trouble, and when the Revolution comes up, he volunteers to serve in the Continental Army. And because he has experience as a soldier, he does well, and Washington selects him to be a part of the Life Guard, and the Life Guards were Washington's bodyguards. But I suppose Hickey wasn't getting paid enough, and so he went back to counterfeiting on his off time. And he is swept up in these raids, and he's in prison. And between him and Forbes, it turns out that Hickey was in fact attempting to assassinate Washington.
Wow. Wow. He was his bodyguard, you said, right?
He was.
Yeah. So what happens? How does that play itself out?
Well, Tom is the only one in prison that is actually in the Army, which means he's the only one who's subject to court-martials and to military law. And what he has done is treason, and that actually is a capital offense. So on the 26th of June, he is court-martialed. And he admits that he had a plan, but he blamed it on a girl, said that she influenced him, and he blamed it on drink. Then he tried to say that he was trying to be some sort of a double agent. He really didn't mean it. He was trying to uncover other people who might be trying to do this. They don't buy any of that. And on the 28th of June, they build a gallows. Those gallows would have been located very close to City Hall today, or to the park. And they hang Thomas Hickey in front of 20,000 observers.
Wow.
So probably the entire city came out to watch him hang. And he is the first soldier executed in the Continental Army.
Wow. Wow. And what date is that again?
That's the 28th of June.
Okay. And so then what happens on the 29th of June, Colonel Sculley?
Well, so on the 29th of June, the British show up.
Yeah.
So on the 26th, we have a court-martial for the assassination of George Washington. On the 28th, the American Army executes that man who was accused and convicted of that potential crime. The very next day, scouts all along New York Harbor start spotting sails and masts. And first they report 20, and then they report 50, and then it's 100, and then it's 200. By July 1st, 430 British naval ships have arrived in New York Harbor carrying 34,000 British soldiers.
Wow.
And on the 2nd of July, they will land on Staten Island unopposed and cheered on by all the loyalists who have fled Manhattan to greet him.
Wow. And so again, I think it's just so mind-boggling to think of a culture where, the entire town is showing up for this execution. Like, what is that environment like? And then the next day, they're seeing the British start to pull up. I mean, just like what would have been going on in that environment is really pretty amazing and intense to think about.
Well, it is. And then that's July 2nd, 1776.
Right.
2 days later, the United States is going to sign the Declaration of Independence. And 5 days after that, George Washington is going to have it read to every soldier in every unit in New York.
Yeah.
So this is getting big fast.
Yeah, and so as a little bit of a cliffhanger, that's where we're going to leave that part of the conversation, because obviously we want to focus next time on the Declaration of Independence. And we are going to save you all and probably not be in this beautiful establishment on July 4th because it can be very hot, but we're going to figure something out. So that's coming. And so I'd love to take a few questions, but before we do, tell us a little bit about what's happening up here in this part of the world when all of this is going down in New York City. Are people engaged? Are they living their own life? Like, what's happening?
Yes. So within the Hudson Valley, again, and we've said this a couple of times, the Hudson River is key. And the Hudson Highlands, or the Hudson Valley here, was considered key to defending the river and maintaining control of the river north of New York City.
Okay.
So in January of 1776, Congress decides that they are not going to fortify Constitution Island any longer. We had talked about this before. Constitution Island was going to be the fortified position in the Hudson Highlands to defend the Hudson River, but it's actually a terrible position to do that from. Congress recognizes this because other Army officers told them that it's a terrible place to put a fort. And so instead, they decide to place a fort overlooking Popolopan Creek right across from Anthony's Nose. So Fort Montgomery, the town, is named for Fort Montgomery, the fort that gets built between January 1776 and August, September of 1776. Along with that fort being built during this period of time, they're going to build a second fort, which we can no longer see because the Bear Mountain Bridge has obliterated it, which is Fort Clinton. So you had two forts on either side of that ravine that we have created by the Popolopan Creek. And across the river is going to be in place the first chain.
Wow.
So Thomas Macon is going to create a chain. He's going to learn from his mistakes, and he's going to put a chain across the river. And that fort, those two forts, will maintain the security of the Hudson Highlands until October of 1777. However, As soon as the British land at Staten Island, Howe decides he's going to send ships up the Hudson River to see what happens.
Wow.
And he sends 5 ships all the way into Haverstraw Bay, and they threaten Peekskill. In response to that, Orange County, Ulster County, Dutchess County all raise 1,200 militiamen instantaneously to fight off any British invasion that might occur. Because the Hudson Valley, unlike New York City, the Hudson Valley is a hotbed for Patriot support. So this is how split the state is. New York City, Long Island, Westchester, those areas are loyalists areas. And Orange, Ulster, Dutchess, these counties are all patriot. So the state is split.
And do you think that's just strictly a commerce factor, like an economic factor? That
Well, not strictly, but there is a lot to that.
Yeah.
So the commerce piece is very important.
Yeah.
If you are in this part of the state, your commerce is probably flowing up to Albany and back down to New York. You may not like the people in New York City because you probably are indebted to them for some reason.
Right.
This is much more rural. So yes, I think that there is some of that. But there are various communities. You have up here, you have a lot of people that have Dutch backgrounds. They're Calvinists, right? They're Dutch Reformed Church. And remember that the New Englanders are all Calvinists, they're Congregationalists. So there's a lot there of this kind of Republican ideal that is different from the Anglicans in New York City. So there's a religious component, there's cultural components.
Wow, it's fascinating. Okay, how about any questions for Sean? Yes, Linda.
I used to live in Washington Heights in Manhattan, and the east of that Tryon was a loyalist. So our most beautiful part there is Fort Tryon. Was there like any redemption for him, or was that just where he was?
So I have actually asked myself that question. And first off, he's a royal governor. He's not going to change his allegiance. I don't actually know the answer as to whether or not that Tryon is the same Tryon.
Okay.
But I actually will find that out.
Okay.
I will.
Just like,
Yeah, I'm on because I also remember seeing that, and I remember going, Tryon, that's an interesting name, and then I didn't look it up. So I actually need to look up who they named the area for.
Area 4.
the beautiful part.
Yeah, King's got a lot of money.
Any other questions? Yes, Dimitri.
Yeah, earlier on, you mentioned the fact that Washington was very frustrated by the fact that a lot of his troops, like they were just coming in and out, they were going back home, and so there was sort of an ebb and flow of the numbers.
Yep.
Did the British have any intelligence about this, and did that work into their strategy as to like them knowing that he was diminished and they would take actions based upon that? Was there any
Do you want to repeat the question just so
Yeah,
people hear?
absolutely. So the question is whether or not the British had intelligence about Washington's problems with keeping accountability of his men while they were surrounding Boston. And the answer is they do have some, but there's not much that they can do about it. And the reason that there's not much that they can do about it is because they themselves are starting to get sick. The winter is very tough on these armies, both armies, but the American army can feed itself. It has access to all this farmland all around New England. They have closed Boston up, and because the winter was so bad and the storms were so bad, the British are not getting much food in to Boston because all their food has to come from ships. They are running out of wood. They actually cut up all of the church pews. They've cut down every tree in Boston. They're doing everything they can to have firewood for heat. They're suffering that winter. Now, Washington, the numbers get worse for Washington. We didn't talk about this, but his entire army goes up in a puff of smoke on the 31st of December, 1775. He has to re-enlist his entire army for 1 January, and not everybody wants to re-enlist. And so his numbers go down from 20,000 to 8,600. And of those, only 5,600 are actually able to do duty because they're not sick. So he's down to like 5,600 effectual soldiers on the 1st of January. Those numbers are going to swell. When the British leave, and he marches to New York, more states are going to get involved, and more states are going to send more soldiers. But on the 1st of January, 1776, his army is about a quarter the size it was the day before.
Wow.
But the British could do nothing to capitalize.
But the British really couldn't capitalize on it at that point. That's right. And their intelligence wasn't that good. I mean, there was one famous spy by the name of Benjamin Church, and Washington doesn't know about him yet. And so there are some issues there, but their intelligence is only so good. Yes,
Yes.
sir, in the back.
So those 430 British ships that sailed down to New York, were they all from Boston, or did they supplement them from England as well?
Okay, so the question is for the armada that arrives in New York in July, late June, early July of 1776, were they all coming, had they all been in Boston before? No, not at all. The British Navy has been working through the winter and into the spring to bring more reinforcements to Richard Howe and bring soldiers from Ireland, from England, from the Caribbean up to New York. This is really an entire push. It is the largest joint operation between an army and a navy in history until D-Day. One soldier from Maryland is very famous. He was pithy. He wrote in his diary, "It seemed as if all of London was afloat." We've never seen so many ships in one place at one time.
Wow. It's amazing. One more question. Yeah. Ardal.
So I love the way you talked about Knox bringing the cannons from Ticonderoga to Boston, because it's so, you make it so vivid with the geography and the weather and all that. I want to ask you to drill down a little bit more on the route, because you said the Mass Pike wasn't there. I was going to because it's kind of swampy in Beckett, and then there's 1,724 feet at the top. Was Route 2, I understand, was like a Native American route before then. Did they follow something like that, or did they have to kind of completely break trail?
No, they didn't. Okay, so the question is, and because I was making a joke about the Mass Pike not being where Knox's route was at the time, he couldn't use the interstate. And the question is, did they have to break completely new trail, or were there trails there that they could use? They were following post roads as much as they could. Now, those post roads are not in great condition. They are not made for this kind of equipment to be moved. It's really made for post riders to ride horse on. But they are able to follow those, and they follow some trails as well. And we are not totally certain exactly the route. So I work at the Digital History Center at West Point. We do projects where we try to learn the answer to questions just like that. And we are actually going to be working on that next year with cadets from West Point. My fellow coworker here, Jeff Goldberg, he's the brains of the Digital History Center, and he's going to actually be working with cadets. We're going to be using drones and other technologies. He's a geospatial wizard, and so he's going to be doing a lot of work. We're going to try to figure out exactly what the route is, but we're not exactly positive. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll try my best.
Was there one more question? Yeah.
So I've been doing a little research that challenges all the stuff we learned growing up, right? That the major strategy of the British were to split the colonies, New England from the rest of the world, and the Hudson River was the split point. Now, Howe never linked up with Burgoyne and Saint Laguerre. It's never seemed to have an interest in linking up with Albany. And the book is The American Revolution in the Hudson Valley.
Yes. Yeah. It's written actually by a naval historian.
It is.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
it seems to challenge that theory that
It
that
does.
was really a red herring. What's your take on that?
I reviewed that book, and I thought it was very well written. I think it's a great argument.
What's the argument, just for the
So
make sure
I'm
people-
sorry. So there is a history book that came out called The American Revolution in the Hudson River, and it makes the argument that the British strategy never really was about trying to seize the Hudson River and split New England colonies from the rest of the colonies. I think my critique was the better way to put that is it probably never would have worked. There are competing strategies, but certainly Burgoyne's movement down from Canada is meant to seize control of the Hudson River. And there is no doubt that Clinton will soon, Henry Clinton, the British Clinton, will in 1780 rue the day that he allowed Washington to continue to threaten his northern flank by fortifying West Point, because he can't support Cornwallis's offensives in the south, because he can't lose New York City. If you read the correspondence between, for example, Henry Clinton, John Burgoyne, St. Germain, Lord North, they all continue to talk about the Hudson River as being the most important thing that they have to control. So I think you can't deny that they are thinking about this always at the strategic level. The real question is whether or not they could have ever actually done it. And I'm not sure that they could. It's too long. It's just too long of a straight line. It just looks good on a map. It's one of those things, we like to say it briefs well. Right? So.
Excellent. All right, well, so I have a question for you.
Yes.
But just to give you all some context, if you know Colonel Sculley, you know that he is retiring at the end of this year from active duty in the Army and at West Point. And so this week was actually the last time he will be teaching classes to his cadets.
Yeah.
And we were really fortunate. There were a few of us who we got to go to we went to his class on Monday, and it was truly a master class in excellent, insightful, compassionate leadership. And it was just such a thrill and incredibly inspiring to see the students just have so much appreciation and gratitude for you and to be engaged in conversation. And so I'm just curious, as you reflect back on all of these years of teaching, if there's one sort of particular idea or theme or concept that you would wish for all of your students to sort of take away from all of your work in the classroom, what would that be?
Character matters.
Interesting.
So in the end, when we study history, when I'm talking to cadets about history, when they're reading history and I'm asking them questions and we're having a dialogue in the classroom, what I want most for them is to be inspired by those who came before them and to learn that character matters always. And one of the ways that they can learn what right looks like and what wrong looks like and what somewhere in between looks like is by studying the past and being inspired to be better through the examples that they learned.
Yeah.
But I gotta be honest, I think in the end they inspired me more than I inspired them. So if you ever get a chance to hang out with a cadet from the United States Military Academy, take that chance, because they are pretty amazing young people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's very special. Excellent. All right. So we're going to do a little closing wrap up here. There's a couple of announcements to make. This is this really amazing map that exists from the Beacon Historical Society. Diane Lapis is here with us tonight. So there are copies here. It's all about the American Revolutionary War and specific events that happened here. They're in the back of the room. You can grab one when you leave. As you're depositing your funds into the red canister, which is raising money for the Beacon Historical Society, specifically for this very first edition brand new book called Hop on the... So this is just a really fantastic book for young adults, for teens, for kids that are here in Beacon. So they're for sale at the Beacon Historical Society. The official launch party is going to be on May 30th. And all of your funds that you're donating tonight are going to go towards making sure that every kid during the backpack the backpack campaign that I Am Beacon does at the end of the summer for kids going back to school in the fall is going to get a copy of this book. So please be sure to contribute.
All right. Hey, and just one thing, because Scott has the last word. So before Scott has the last word, I would just like to say, can we give a huge round of applause for Scott and for what he does? All right. Thank you so much. for being willing to do this with me. I know that this was just supposed to be one time, and somehow I've roped you into 4, and it's been over a year. So thank you very much. You make this so much fun.
It is
So I
100%
appreciate
my pleasure. 100%
Yeah.
my pleasure, honestly. Yeah. It's absolutely a team effort. It was born out of a great conversation with the Costellos and Susan and Bill and Brian and Jenny. We were all sitting around one day, and that's how it all got born. So it's a great thing. So please be sure and take really good care of Dennings Point Distillery with Alana. Take really good care of them. Campbell, they're all there, amazing people. Thank you all so much. There will be more to come. We're mapping that out, so stay tuned. And we've got the Declaration of Independence conversation coming up this summer, so stay tuned for that.